Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of the GD Report. I am D.
And I'm G. Happy to be
Great.
with you.
Hey, how you doing, G man?
I'm doing well.
Good. Good to see
Living
you. Nice to see you out fly fishing today.
right. That's
Uh,
where I wish I was. Trust me.
don't we all? Don't we all?
Right.
Well, welcome everybody to another edition, and we've got a good potpourri of topics today to go around and talk about. A lot of things happening in the news, and so we're just going to kick it off. Big controversy yesterday was a story that came out about some comments that President Trump made regarding troops and not just the troops, but those who had served and those who had also been killed and in action, the KIAs. And so, the overarching story is basically that he had referred to them as losers, and obviously this is hitting a sore spot for a lot of us, and it's really, really despicable. G-Man, what's your take on this story?
Well, Trump, as expected, is denying it. He basically says he has nothing but respect, but we know how he treated one war hero, the late Senator John McCain. He famously said, "I like my heroes to not get captured,"
Right.
Which is just a slap in the face for anybody who's fought and actually been taken prisoner. So to me, it's not a far stretch to, from what I know of Trump, to think that he would say these things. What does kind of get me is the immediate outpouring of support that members of the military have shown in favor of Trump, basically saying, there's no way he would say this, and coming to his defense, which I don't see how you can be a sane person and reach that conclusion.
Yeah, it's definitely, the biggest sacrifice that somebody can make in service to their country is obviously to give their life, and to even be flippant in any way about that, pretty big challenge. One thing that's interesting, though, I will tell you this: when you talked about some of the people coming out to support Trump, there was an interesting poll that came out in Military Times this week that showed pretty significant numbers. 42% of all respondents in that poll said they strongly disapprove of Trump's time in office.
Right.
And nearly 49% had almost 49.9% had an unfavorable view of him. And Joe Biden actually came out on top in a head-to-head poll at 41% to Trump's 37%.
Right.
About 13% or so saying they were going to support a third party. So pretty interesting that the folks that are actually doing the service are favoring Biden at this point.
Right. Now there's 2 months to go before the election. So, a lot of things, there's plenty of time for lots of shenanigans. We'll see what comes up, but that's a pretty significant figure if it holds.
Yeah, and I agree. Definitely, polls typically always do tighten, but I will tell you, for a Democrat, considering all the propaganda that gets pushed out about Democrats being socialist and all the things about wanting to defund police and things like that are totally off base, by the way.
Right.
It's interesting for a Democrat to even be in the lead at this point. And another thing to think about with our service people, particularly overseas, is how are they going to vote in this election, right?
Right.
They're going to vote by mail.
Yep.
Which we've talked about on a previous podcast before, the fact that there's so much shenanigans going on with the Postal Service right now. I would hate for those folks' votes not to be counted or to be counted accurately.
Yeah, I'm with you there. So, like I said, there's plenty of time for shenanigans, and we'll just have to see how that mail controversy plays out. It seems to have died down a little bit, but usually that just means they're doing things behind the scenes that we haven't found out about yet. So, we'll see how that goes.
Why don't we segue now, but keep on a similar topic. Tell us what you know about the Pentagon shutting down Stars and Stripes.
Yeah, so, Trump is famous for basically saying journalists are the enemy of the people. I guess Stars and Stripes has done, as you know, as they would as a legitimate news organization. They've done some profiles of the candidates, and you know, Trump has decided that that publication, which started during the Civil War, so it, you know, its history goes back a long ways, 150 years or more, and it's been a lifeline for, you know, our military overseas for decades. Anyway, he's ordered the Pentagon has ordered the publisher to basically submit a plan by September 15th for how to shut it down.
Wow.
And so there, it looks like that publication is going to go away under the Trump watch.
That's really scary. It's another instance of taking things that were in the past always viewed in a nonpartisan way, apolitical, and hyper politicizing it to a point that something like Stars and Stripes would even be considered political. It's the same thing as people viewing wearing a face covering or wearing a face mask as a political statement, or not wearing one as a political statement.
Right.
It's saying that this particular president has politicized almost everything. You know, it used to be when we got to the saying was when we got to the water's edge, that politics and party stopped.
Right.
We united as Americans to support troops as they were overseas. And now we're just seeing the blatant politicization of that. It also strikes at kind of a core message that we've seen from this particular president, in the fact that he absolutely cannot take any form of criticism. He personalizes every form of criticism. Somebody could say the job market is not as strong as it should be, and he views that as a personal thing, as opposed to a political or a policy criticism. Because we should be in a free society, be able to criticize openly and not worry about retribution or fear. And he sure doesn't believe that.
Well, the Constitution gives us that right, and I'm not sure he believes in the Constitution with some of the things that he's done and said. And you know, at the Republican convention, he had his supporters chant 12 more years instead of the traditional 4 more years. So,
Right.
and it wouldn't surprise me in a second term of if Trump gets reelected, that he moves to try and eliminate some of the barriers to him serving another 4 more years after that.
Would not shock me either.
Yep.
Speaking of criticism, it seems like there is a new book about this administration every other day.
Right, it does.
I want to talk about a couple of books that came out this week and garnered a lot of publicity. The first one I want to talk about is a book by Michael Schmidt of the New York Times. And he just had a book that came out where he talked a lot about a lot of things happening with President Trump, and talked about, in particular, about some of the health. That was one of the things that really kind of sparked the news this week, was the health crisis last November. The title of the book is Donald Trump v. the United States. And Michael Schmidt is the author, again, from the New York Times. But there was a case last November where Trump unexpectedly took a trip to Walter Reed Medical Center.
Right.
It was never announced why he took the trip. It was never announced what the purpose was. It was never announced what happened, other than a vague press statement was given that it was part of his annual physical that they decided to do in pieces, as opposed to doing the full physical, which had been, par for the course typically takes about 4 to 6 hours, and they do it in one setting. So
Right.
What's your take on this particular topic?
Well, wasn't that, if I'm recalling correctly, wasn't that trip to Walter Reed at night?
It was on like a Saturday afternoon, I believe.
Oh, gotcha. So
Saturday
not
afternoon. Yeah,
so
and
go ahead.
not a regularly scheduled.
Yeah.
And the part that got everyone's attention was that Mike Pence, vice president, was put on notice to be ready to take command of the presidency should President Trump have to go under anesthesia.
Right. Well, and then you follow that up with he had trouble walking down a normal ramp, and he, there's a famous clip where he's using his left hand to, bring a water glass up to his lips. So that's being held in his right hand. So, all signs point to a stroke. And I think that's what the speculation is, that he had a stroke. And I think because of that, he's kind of tamped down his criticism of Biden's medical, if there's anything to that. But, he was criticizing Biden for being too old and being senile and, wanted him to take a drug test. And so I think that Walter Reed episode, which he hasn't addressed, I think that's playing into his backing off on that part of his strategy.
Yeah, the water glass incident happened at West Point during his speech to
Yep.
Graduates there, in particular when the cadets were called back in for that graduation, risking their lives during COVID. So it was pretty interesting to me that that's when that happened. The other thing that I will just note about Trump is this. The patterns that I've seen and others have noticed as well is the fact that he typically will point out his own weakness and project that weakness onto his opponents.
Yeah.
So he will say things like, Joe Biden has a health crisis, or Joe Biden's frail, when in fact he's the person that has the health crisis.
Yeah.
He's the person that's frail. Interestingly enough, Schmidt never mentioned the term stroke or mini stroke in his book. Yet when Trump responded vociferously on Twitter, he stated that he never had any mini strokes and it was fake news.
Right.
So, interesting that he brought it up and projected that. There's a lot of other, I recommend that book. I haven't read it all. I've read some excerpts.
Right.
A lot of other powerful statements in that book. And it just shows kind of the brink of chaos that we all figure we're on, but it just really documents it.
Right.
Well, we've got a little bit more time. I want to talk about one other book, and that is a new book that came out this week by Stephanie Winston Wolkoff. And the title of the memoir is Melania and Me.
Right.
In this book, Stephanie Winston Wolkoff is a longtime friend and associate of Melania Trump. And she really drops a lot of bombshells. The biggest thing to me, and I think, everybody typically is interested in the gossipy kind of things about anybody that's a celebrity.
Right.
But a couple of things really stood out to me. Number one was that Melania is using a personal email address, much like Jared Kushner is, much like Ivanka Trump is, to conduct official White House business,
Right.
which I don't know if you remember anything about emails.
Well, I remember.
Last election. Do you remember anything about that?
Yeah, they criticized Hillary for having her, conducting business on a private server that, by the way, was located about 10 miles from where I'm sitting right now here in Colorado.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that was one of the big revelations. And the other big one, which I think could at some point have some criminal implications, was that Miss Wolkoff was tasked with helping lead the inauguration and the inaugural festivities. And it's interesting that the Trump inauguration cost $107 million.
Right.
And of that $107 million, 26 million of that went to Mrs. Wolkoff's firm.
Right.
And of which she says that she kept about $1 million. But there's a whole lot of other money that's unaccounted for. That $107 million, by the way, is twice what Barack Obama's first inauguration cost. And that being said, you look at the attendance, and I know Trump does not want to hear this if he's listening, but his inaugural was a lot lighter attended than President Obama's first inauguration was, and they had fewer events.
Yeah.
The level of the talent that performed was a lot different. And I mean, Three Doors Down at Trump's versus Bruce Springsteen, Beyonce, a lot bigger names, which required a lot of security, a lot more staging and lighting.
Yep.
So there's a lot of things to be able to answer for what happened to all those millions of dollars that were raised for this inauguration.
Yep. Yeah. So the inference is that it went right into the Trump and Trump family, extended family's pockets. And so part of the inquiry that the Manhattan District Attorney and the New York and New Jersey Attorney Generals are looking into is exactly that, because the inaugural committee was incorporated in New York, and so they're looking into some shenanigans of which Trump is fighting, to keep his financial records private. And you notice he's not saying he's under audit anymore. He's just basically saying he's not going to release his records. So
yeah, it's kind of I don't really know a fancy Colorado term to use. I'll just use an Oklahoma term. It's pretty much giving the American voter the middle finger.
absolutely. So, and I remember when the Patriot Act was being passed, and a lot of people were against that, including myself. I had some friends basically say, if you got nothing to hide, you shouldn't be against this. Well, Mr. Trump, if you've got nothing to hide, why don't you release your tax returns? My guess is because you've got plenty to hide, and you don't want the American people knowing until you get reelected, if ever. So,
Right.
there's a lot to raise your eyebrows at.
Yeah, and it also points to the fact of why he's been so desperate to stuff the courts with his appointed judges and judges
Right.
that feel an allegiance to him, because I think it has very little to do with conservative ideology, because personally, I don't think Donald Trump really has an ideology. I think his ideology is himself.
Yep.
That's all he cares about. And I think he views the judiciary as when he makes an appointment, that person should be loyal to him for all time and all eternity. The
Yep.
challenge for him is going to be when he's out of office, what those judges do at that point, because you've already seen him flex back a little bit on Neil Gorsuch for a couple of Supreme Court rulings and saying that that's not why he appointed him. And, he's made statements about Jeff Sessions, when Jeff Sessions was the Attorney General, that he wishes he had somebody to support him, and he thought Jeff Sessions would have his back, when that's not the role of the Attorney General. The Attorney General is to be the attorney for the people.
Well, it is now under Bill Barr. So
Well,
he got what he wanted in Bill Barr. So
he sure did. And Bill Barr will get remembered in history as one of the worst, if not the worst, Attorney General. I thought that might be reserved for John Mitchell under the Nixon administration, but I think Bill Barr is going to by far surpass that. And I hope that when and I hope that when Vice President Biden wins, and I hope that is a win, not an if, and I hope he pulls it out, that we need a commission on reconciliation in our country where everything that's happened in the last 4 years is fully investigated, fully vetted, and fully brought out into the open so that it can never happen again.
Yep. Well, and I think, it'll take a constitutional amendment to make this happen, but I really think we need an independently elected attorney general.
Yeah.
I think that would go a long ways, because then you're absolutely not beholden to the president. And, we wouldn't have these kind of things you still might, because, your AG, excuse me, your AG might be friends with the guy in the White House, but, hopefully, they recognize they've got a responsibility and to the voters, and they have to get reelected. And so,
well, I don't know how we'll ever get there, but the justice system as a whole needs to be depoliticized.
Yeah.
And party needs to be taken out of it, because we need people that are not going on to the judiciary with an agenda. And I'm afraid we've got plenty of people that have a clear-cut agenda, and people are inherently going to have bias. There's no doubt about that. But when we're seeing Mitch McConnell and the Republicans in the Senate push through more judicial lifetime appointments in the first 3.5 years than Barack Obama had in 8, or Bill Clinton had in 8, or George W. Bush had in 8 years, that's a challenge for us as a system, because you're just front loading a judicial system hoping to get the rulings that you want, as opposed
Right.
to appointing qualified people, which most of these people McConnell pushed through were ruled by the American Bar Association as unqualified to hold those positions.
Yep.
You're hoping you have qualified people that weigh the law, weigh the case that's put before them, and then give an unbiased decision.
Yeah, I'm afraid, like you are, that that's not going to be the case, but we'll see. You know, history has a way of setting things straight, and people, when they realize that they're kind of on the hot seat, and you know, that history is what is the ultimate arbiter, you know, they sometimes kind of change their stripes, which I think that's what happened with John Roberts, and what we might be seeing happening to some extent with Neil Gorsuch.
Very, very high likelihood. Well, hey, it's been another great discussion. As always, want to encourage everyone. Early voting, I believe, has begun in some states.
Yep, not here, not. We get ours in the first week of October.
I think it might be in North Carolina or some other states that ballots have flipped in some places.
Yes, they have.
Please get registered to vote. Make your vote count. Make your voice be heard. The best thing to do is get registered early, and if you can vote early, if you can vote by mail early, get it done, get it in the mail, get it at a drop box, but know your process. The only way we're ever going to affect change is if we all participate.
Right. I'd like to add one other thing. Wherever you get your podcast, except for iTunes, they're still taking their time approving our podcast, but we are now on iHeartRadio podcast, so you can get us there. That's audio only, but you can listen to it in your car, or
There might be a better version.
Right. Yeah, might be a better version. So check us out there if you want.
All right. Thanks so much, everybody. Take care. Stay safe out there, and we will talk to you again soon.
Sounds great. See you, everybody.